Welcome back to the Grenadier podcast, Real Estate Uncovered. Today I speak with Courtney Donaldson from Wynn Williams on what you need to know as a homeowner when going through a separation. You obviously love this business. Tell me what you love the most about it. Today, an absolute exclusive. Welcome back to the Grenadier podcast, Real Estate Uncovered. Courtney, could you introduce yourself to us?
Hi, I'm Courtney Donaldson. I'm a senior associate at Wynn Williams. So we're a national law firm. We've got offices in Christchurch, Auckland and Queenstown. But I'm a specialist relationship property or family lawyer. So I specialise in separations and dividing property, but also do a lot of sort of trust disputes, estate disputes, childcare disputes, and also some family violence as well.
Whoa. Yeah. And you're still smiling.
Yeah, I do love my job. Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah. So, Courtney, I guess what we'd love to know from you is if people are buying property together, whether it be couples or perhaps brother-sister or friends buying property, what are the things that they should bear in mind?
Whether they should get legal advice beforehand, and the answer is usually yes. But I suppose when you're buying a property, you want to think about what's the source of those funds. You know, is it going to be coming from your own property, from say some trust money, or is there going to be some parents that are actually assisting with the deposit, which often happens when purchasing a property. So the source of funds, what is the intention? Is the intention for it to be your property? Or is it actually going to be what we'd call relationship property if you are in a relationship, and the implications of that? So, yeah, the source and how you want to own it, and therefore how is it going to be viewed by the law in terms of how you own it when you purchase that property. Yeah.
And so would people come to you and say we need a property agreement or a sharing agreement or a prenup or a something?
Yes, so that's a big part of our work. So a lot of the time it is couples or people that have been in a relationship for a couple of years, and they're aware of the fact that if they've been living together for 3 years, they can be deemed a qualifying relationship under the Act, and therefore what we call the presumption of equal sharing applies. So they're saying to us, hey, look, we want to buy a property. We don't want it to be divided equally if we were to separate in a year's time. Can you help us? And so they'll come to us and we'll obviously give them advice and draft a bespoke agreement depending on their circumstances and their intention and wishes. But also people that are buying property together that are siblings or friends or business partners, they can come and get a property sharing agreement so that they've got an enforceable agreement in relation to that property purchase and how they're owning it and how they're going to meet the outgoings, and they've got some mechanisms for sale and various things if they fall out or don't want to own that property together in the future.
Yes, because I guess as properties got more expensive, there is different ownership structures now, isn't there? And often we're hearing about, friends buying together and things like that. So it's fine to do that, but it's really when one of you moves on and wants to buy a property perhaps with a loved one, or you get married, how do you extract yourself out of that agreement?
Absolutely. So it's just, my advice is always get legal advice, and it's worth spending a little bit amount of money to have some certainty and have an agreement that's actually going to ensure your interests are met and your intentions are going to be met, rather than to think everything's going to be fine and suddenly it's not, and it can become really stressful and really costly to try and resolve the issue down the track.
Yes. Yeah. And so if people buy a property with someone else and they don't do anything up front, does it automatically mean after 3 years it's 50-50, or is it only if they're a couple per se?
Yeah, so the legislation is essentially if you've been living together as a couple for 3 years, then you're going to be deemed a qualifying relationship. There's a lot of factors that the court considers that's in the legislation. It's can be on a case-by-case basis. What I would say is you don't have to be technically living under the same roof to be deemed living in a relationship for 3 years. But obviously the Act, the Property Relationships Act, applies to married couples and civil unions as well. And so in those three situations, qualifying relationship, marriage, civil union, a presumption of equal sharing applies. And that's particularly important, obviously, to the family home and chattels. They are deemed to be relationship property and divided equally. There's obviously some exceptions, but that's the key thing to be aware of.
General rule is 3 years.
Yeah. And the one thing I'd always say is don't wait till there's 3 year mark is up.
To 2 months to go. Oh, we better do something.
Yes, get in early, get advice, do an agreement early. It takes time to get advice, prepare it. To have a binding agreement, both parties need to receive independent legal advice and have that agreement certified by a lawyer. Your leverage goes away to get your other party to enter into agreement with you if you've already over that 3 year mark, and suddenly their interests have crystallised. Whereas if you're doing it prior, it's a lot easier to get somebody to sign off. And it's not just things like property. There's lots of things that the Act might provide for upon separation that you might not expect. Pets, for example, they are a chattel, and a lot of people don't realise that. You may buy your beloved dog during your relationship. You've been together for 3 years and suddenly that's treated as relationship property. It doesn't mean that you're going to get to keep that. The other interesting example is things like engagement rings. People might spend, $10,000, $20,000 on a ring, and then they provide it to their spouse as a gift, and then suddenly you separate after, say, 4 or 5 years, and that's that person's separate property. They don't need to account to you for half its value.
Wow.
So there's lots of reasons to get a contracting out agreement or prenup agreement.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let's go to the other end of the spectrum. You've had a lovely married couple who've lived their best life, and 7, 8 years later, we don't get on. We're going to need to sell the family home. We need to separate. Pretty sad situation.
Yep. They
come to you for advice. What happens?
Yeah, so first of all, we give them advice about what the situation may be. We get disclosure from them in terms of the asset pool. We get the background information in terms of when their relationship began and therefore whether it's a qualifying relationship or not. So we give them advice about what their entitlements are. But obviously one of the first things we do is try and protect their immediate interests. So for example, you may have been in a relationship with somebody for 20 years, but only one party has their name on the title of the family home.
Right.
So you'd want to be getting advice pretty quickly after separation, so you can go and lodge a notice of claim, for example, on that title to prevent it being sold without your agreement. So that's a really important thing to do to protect your interests if you're not on the title. But obviously taking a step back, actually figuring out if you are on the title or not. A lot of people don't know.
Wow.
So the best advice when you are separating is speak to a lawyer as soon as possible. I would suggest speaking to a specialist relationship property or family lawyer. And I'm biased, but it's our expertise, and I think it can be a lot more cost effective if you go to somebody who works in that area and it's their bread and butter. So go to the right person, do it early, and actually if you're the one leaving the relationship, you can always go and get some advice before you do so as well. So you know that you've got your ducks in a row and you're making some informed decisions, and you can sort of plan how you're going to do things before you actually advise that you are leaving the relationship. That can be really beneficial as well.
Yeah. And that's probably a similar time that we also get called in. And we often will say, well, is either party in a position to buy the other one out, or no, we need to go to market and we need to sell the property.
Yes.
Sometimes one person's not living there anymore. So there's quite a lot of things to get through, isn't there?
Yeah, and I guess the best thing that you guys can do as real estate agents is to really encourage them to go and get that legal advice, but for them to both get independent legal advice, they both need to go to different lawyers.
Yes.
And I suppose in terms of the interrelationship between the real estate agents and us as lawyers, the thing that can be really helpful is having that really open and transparent correspondence between both parties.
Yes.
So, both parties are involved in all communications, phone calls, emails. I think that really assists with the process as well. And I suppose going through a separation is such a stressful thing to go through, and I guess it's our job as jobs as professionals to really assist them, be that objective person in the room and help them get through that process and through the other side.
Yeah. In terms of going through that separation and then divorce, how do you assess who gets what and what's the process?
Yeah, so it's obviously case by case. It
Yes.
depends on whether if they're a qualifying relationship, that presumption of equal sharing would apply. And so often what we do in terms of a process is we get disclosure from our client, and the other side we work out what is the asset pool, what's personally owned property, what's trust property, other entities. We then try and work out values. We then will say, does somebody want to keep specific property? Is somebody in a position to actually buy out the other property or their family home? Or is this a situation where it needs to go to sale, go to market?
Yes.
And then what you're doing, you're obviously selling it, discharging the mortgage, and then dividing the equity, often equally. But there's often some adjustments to with respect to the other property, and it may be that somebody's maybe retaining the majority of the equity in the family home and the other party's got the rest of the other property. So it really is on a case by case basis, and that's why you need that advice.
Yes. And sometimes, obviously, one person's left the home, perhaps they've gone off and said, I'm out of here.
Yes.
And the other person's been living there. So say someone's been out of the family home for a year, then they decide it is time to sell it. There's obviously some adjustment for the person who's remained in the home and paid the mortgage potentially. You obviously have to work your way through all of that as well.
Yes, very much so. But again, what I would say is it depends on the fact scenario. So it could be that somebody has been paying the outgoings and the mortgage since separation, but often that could be in lieu of what we call occupational rent.
Yes.
For the fact that they've had the benefit of
living there.
living in that property
Yes.
for, say, a year, and the other parties actually had to go and pay rent to live
Yes.
somewhere else.
Yeah.
The other situation is where one party may have been the higher income earner during the relationship, and they may have what we call spousal maintenance obligations. And so it could be that they're paying all the outgoings on the family home in lieu of spousal maintenance. So it really is, again, a case-by-case situation, and it's about getting that good legal advice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If someone leaves the home but they don't sell it, say, for 2 years and the market moves a lot in that time, when's the test of, is it the sale time or is it?
Yeah, so when you go to a hearing, that's when we would normally value the property, value at hearing.
Yeah.
But you can make an application to the court essentially to say there should be a different valuation date. But when it's relationship property, generally both parties will get the benefit of the increase
growth
in value.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's normally around the time it's sold as opposed to when someone left.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
They're obviously quite sad and stressful situations.
Yep.
What piece of advice would you give to people other than seeking legal advice?
Take a breath.
Yeah.
And communication is key. Having really open communication, be really forthcoming with your disclosure. And often in the work that I do, there are children involved, and I do a lot of the childcare disputes. And so it's stepping back and taking a look at the full situation, what's in the interest of the children.
Yes.
And a lot of the time when people are separating, they dislike their spouse or their ex-spouse, but they need to remember that they are forever potentially going to have a relationship through their children. And so just remembering that, and the more amicable and reasonable you can be, the better off you'll often be in the long term, and often the less costly it's going to be as well. So yeah, just taking a breath and having good communication.
Yes. And in terms of, you've probably answered this question, but what are some of the biggest mistake people make in their ability to dissolve their relationship and their property?
I mean, the first one is not getting advice quickly.
Yes.
And not getting good advice. It's really important to ask around, speak to people, and go to the right person and the person that's got expertise in that area.
Yes.
But, other than that, it's really communication, not having good communication and not taking a moment to look at the big picture and getting really focused on the sort of more minor issues. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
If there was sort of a best case scenario, what would you advise people to do?
Both get advice straight away.
Yes. But, if it gets a bit contentious and it drags on for months and months, like, what is the best case scenario? Do you have to say to people, like, come on, guys?
Yeah, I'm a fan of getting in a room together with the appropriate people.
Okay, right.
A lot of time and money can be wasted sending letters between lawyers or between people.
Yes.
Often it's beneficial to just get in a room, have the right people with you, your advisors or your support persons, but just talk about it, get across the table, figure out, this is the problem we have. Let's talk about some solutions.
Yes.
So getting in a room, speaking face to face can be really helpful. And most of the time, our separations are resolved by way of mediations. We often go to court when we have to, but you don't want to go to court. It's stressful and it's costly. So mediating is the best way to do it, and getting in a room and trying to resolve your disputes face to face.
Yeah.
Yep.
Courtney, what are the sort of time frames that separations take, and kind of a bit of a ballpark on costs?
Yeah, so that's a really difficult question. Best case scenario, you might have a couple come in who that have done their homework, they've done their disclosure, and they've agreed in principle on what they want. And you could be a week or two between reviewing that disclosure, giving them the advice, drafting an agreement, and then settlement would normally be, say 10 working days following that.
Yes.
You've got to allow time for obviously one party to get finance if they are buying the other one out. Absolute best case scenario, a few weeks, a month is probably more realistic in the best case scenario.
Yes.
Unfortunately, in worst case scenario, where things are really complex and adversarial between the parties, it can take years.
Wow.
The family court system, unfortunately, is really slow.
Yes.
And particularly for relationship property matters, other sort of matters like care of children or family violence get a bit more priority, which I suppose is appropriate.
Yes.
So, it can take time, but that's why it's important, again, to get that good advice, have good communication and be reasonable so you can resolve your problem and get through to the other side and move on with your life.
And in terms of perhaps moving on to the next chapter, buying a new home, starting again, once you've got that separation agreement, you can go to the bank, get pre-approved and start your process?
Yeah, I mean, once you've got your property that's your separate property, and you've got a binding agreement saying that whatever you've come out with is your sole and separate property, obviously you can go and do that. If your funds are essentially tied up in a relationship property dispute, I'm not sure you're going to be able to go and buy a new property unless you've obviously got some other source from family or friends.
Yes,
but
true.
Yeah, you really do need to resolve your relationship property dispute so you can then move on to the next chapter.
Courtney, thank you so much for your advice. It's an area that unfortunately a lot of people have to kind of navigate their way through. But I think getting a specialist advice, as you said, you're working in that field day by day, you know the way. It makes it very efficient if you've got someone who knows how to get you across the other side.
Yes, yeah. Thank you for having me. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you so much for tuning into the Grenadier podcast. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Please give us 5 stars. We'd really appreciate it.